Hello, everybody, and welcome to TTP at Home, where once a month we bring in one of our speakers that's making the rounds at our satellites so that anybody, anywhere, anytime can enjoy True Texas Project's messaging. So today we have Michael Quinn Sullivan of Texas Scorecard. He's going to be helping us prepare for the next legislative session, and let's get right to it.
Okay, we're going to start the program today with some of our announcements. We've got some really cool things lined up for September speakers at our 17 satellite groups around the state. We have John Guandolo. We have USCCA, that's U.S. Concealed Carry Association, talking to us about concealed carry and the legal ramifications of that. We have conversations about central bank digital currency. We're talking about the Chinese influence in Texas, Jesus and politics with Bunny Pounds, a few movie nights, which everybody loves, bring your popcorn, and of course, prepping for the next session with several of our partner organizations. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Our how-to video for September is how to close the border. So be sure you attend a meeting to see that, or once the meetings are finished, you can find that online. Be sure to check our calendar for all of the things that are going on and the details of when and where, and also social events. I think I counted 18 this morning, but there'll be more before the end of the month. So check that out on the website.
Okay, well then let's introduce our speaker. We do have Michael Quinn Sullivan with us. I know a lot of you see Michael as like the father figure of conservative politics in Texas. He's been around longer than True Texas Project has been around. I'm not actually sure when, maybe he'll tell us. Started off with Empower Texans, and now he's got Texas Scorecard. So if you're like me, you don't even get out of bed before you've read the Texas Minute, which is great news. I recommend it to everybody. And then one thing I always like to, anytime we are talking about Michael Quinn Sullivan at my house, it is the dreaded and feared Michael Quinn Sullivan. My husband came up with that. It is a pet name and definitely said in love. So we're excited to have you on today. Why don't you just kind of give us maybe a better history of what you've done, what gives you the right to speak? How about that?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Nothing gives me the right to speak that doesn't give anyone else. That's the First Amendment to this Constitution. I think that we have all gotten a little... We've all gotten lazy about our rights, and particularly on the most foundational of our rights. And I don't mean the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. I actually mean the right to govern ourselves. The idea that we as the citizens are supposed to be in charge. But the only way that we can be effectively in charge as citizens is if all of us, the Committee to Save the Republic, if you will, if we're all having honest, ongoing conversations about what's actually happening. And that's what we try to do at Texas Scorecard. Help folks, at a minimum. I don't care if people like what we write. Well, I actually do care about that. Right?
We like it.
What I really care more about anything else is, are people asking questions based on the things we write about? We don't cover everything. I would love for us to have more staff so we could cover more, all that all those kind of things, right? But at a minimum, we're trying to help folks see the questions asked. When we write about something happening in, some school district in West Texas, okay, definitionally, most people don't live there, right? But what's happening there is probably happening somewhere else.
Yeah.
Either it's already happened, so that can help those people know how to navigate it, or it's coming and now they can be warned. And we owe that to each other.
What are some of the most popular?
Most of my professional life has been spent doing that as a newspaper reporter, as a guy working for a congressman, working for a couple think tanks, and on through. That has been kind of around that idea of, we owe it to each other as citizens to have these kind of conversations.
I didn't know you did all that.
Well, you do weird things in your background. So.
Maybe we should expand this interview and go a lot longer, because I'm sure that it's super interesting. But
and bore all of your audience. That's a horrible thing to do to these nice people. Don't do this to these nice people.
So you have the written, I read it every morning, and then you can go to online and look at all the different articles. They're fantastic. But you have podcasts as well, right?
Yeah. So we do a variety of both audio and then video podcasts, shows, whatever you're supposed to call them. I get confused. But
it's a generation after us.
Definitely. Yeah. No kidding. So every day we put out the Texas Minute email, and I do a podcast called the Texas Minute. Every day, Brandon Waltons does an afternoon show called Daily Headlines, in which, again, kind of looking at very briefly some of the stuff that our team has covered. We have Sarah Gonzalez, who does a weekly show for us. A lot of folks know her from The Blaze, so real excited to have her with us. Chris Salcedo does a daily podcast, which is kind of a mixture of both of original interviews as well as content from his radio show and his Newsmax TV show. Easily the hardest working human being I've ever met, Chris Salcedo.
We love him, yeah.
You've got Charles Blaine, who does a weekly show really focused on, it's easy to say he's focused on Houston. That's not fair. He's more focused on kind of urban issues, because there is a difference if you live in the city of Fort Worth, the city of Houston, the city of Dallas, versus living in Hood County or somewhere.
Right.
There's a difference. And that we as conservatives have very often, one of my pet frustrations has been we as conservatives all sit there and say, I only care about who the president is. And I'm going to debate, to the nth degree about the qualifications of the deputy associate assistant secretary of chief of staff or whatever.
We've all been there.
Yeah. And none of which translates to meaningfully impacting anyone. Right. And if our principles, our ideas mean anything, they've got to work whether you're talking about in inner city Houston or in rural West Texas. They have to work all those places, or else they're probably not worth much.
That's a huge job.
That's very cool stuff.
Okay, so I remember once you and I were having a conversation. It might have even been over email. I can't remember. But I asked a question about something, and you said that is one of the hottest topics that you guys cover. And it was about all of the sex scandals in the schools.
Yeah.
And so that just made me wonder, and I'm sorry I interrupted you a second ago, but what are the hot, you know.
Services, sure. There's all sorts of sides there. But when we start talking about these institutions that we as adults tend to kind of take for granted, like public education, where, I don't care if you like this or not. We homeschooled our kids, and they were in charter schools for a while. So, Michael didn't care about public school. No, I do care about public school. 95% of Texans are in public school. No matter what the legislature does in 2025 on school choice, 95% of kids are going to be in
and our
public
money
schools.
supports it.
Yes.
Our money supports it.
We should care about it.
And yet, on any given election, something like 95% of our fellow Texans take a look at the possibility of an election and go, I've got other things to do. Meaning only 5% of the electorate is voting in the school board elections. And that's not the way our system's supposed to work.
No. That's why it's not working.
And so any time that we can point out, and look, it's easy when you see these horrific, horrible stories about teachers and coaches and principals and all, abusing children. It's horrible. But the point that I try to make sure that we make as often as possible is, and so, Julie, have you been voting? Fran, Michael, have you been voting? What am I doing personally to address this problem in this horrific culture that we have all? You can't say, the horrible school board, the horrible superintendent. No. We hire those people. Those are our servants. It's like the owner of a Chick-fil-A saying, well, man, those employees at my Chick-fil-A are just horrible. They've ruined everything. Well, guess who hired them? And if you want to see an improvement, you and I have to take more responsibility for the horrible things that we're allowed to happen.
It takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes uncomfortable situations and conversations. So
you recently wrote a commentary about that. You frequently do, but just a couple of weeks ago, your Friday message was about activists holding elected officials accountable, and that we as citizens, we're not just the cheerleading squad, that we have to get to know them, we have to talk to them, we have to constantly connect with them if we are going to be that self-governed citizenry that we've talked about. Can you expand just a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Because I love when you write about that thing. This is something we've been preaching for over a decade.
Right.
And it's just so important and so hard to get people to actually do.
Well, there's this tendency for a lot of us, for particularly on the right. The right seems to have this problem more than the left.
Yeah.
People on the right, we're kind of like the Tory party in England. The Tories who say, the king is a complete idiot, but God save the king. We all bow and scrape. We may dislike passionately our U.S. senator, but when he walks in the room, we all want to get a picture and make sure we're on the Christmas card list and all those kind of things. We have to do a better job of treating our elected officials as employees, and I think that's the exact right way to approach it, as employees. I'll reveal something to myself here that I probably shouldn't. I eat Chick-fil-A way too much. I've already mentioned them twice. I expect a check from them, But that today, like most days I'm on the road, I find a Chick-fil-A, and I drive through, or go inside, and the poor kid helping me. He could not get that wanted large fries and a large sweet tea. I must have been the only person to have ever asked for both, I guess. I don't know. He didn't, and so, back and forth, no, and a large sweet tea. What? He just, poor kid, didn't get it. Okay. Finally order. He's just a kid taking an order. That's great. Gave you my, $900, whatever it costs now, okay, that's great. I'm going to go sit down and eat. But at the end of the day, he's just a kid taking my order. And it takes a couple minutes and you get it right. That is on, and I know nothing about the kid. He might be an axe murderer. I hope he's not. He might be the sweetest kid, in his homeschool class. I don't know. We need that.
Right.
All I know is at the end of the day, I did get my 12 nuggets, my large fries, and my large sweet tea. And I was a very happy camper, allowing me to plow on through the rest of the day. I have no, this is horribly admit, but I have no emotional investment in that kid. He is just a kid at the Chick-fil-A. Took a while to get the order right. I'd give him a C for getting, for ordering, an A for delivering, right? Okay. And that's just, because he is just that to me. But in politics, we all act like that rather than being the kid at the Chick-fil-A, this is our grandmother at Thanksgiving dinner who, overcooked the turkey. And so we don't want to say it. And we're all dancing around the fact that the turkey tastes like a shoe and all those No, this person's our employee. They're not our family member. And that we have to be honest. And I could have played the political game with the kid, said, oh, okay, I'll take the grilled nugget. I ordered, chicken nuggets, large fry, large cheese. But if you're going to, you give me grilled nuggets and small fries and a diet tab, then I'll just take that, I guess. That's what we do in politics all the time.
Yes.
And then we pretend like it's, we have to do a better job of treating these folks like employees, like they're our servants. And our founding fathers weren't being cute when they wanted us to refer to our office holders as servants. That's how they envisioned it. You got to understand the 18th century, the world was divided into rulers and servants, and that they turned upside down that calculus. They flipped the entire script. And we've now spent the last 200 years trying to reflip the script, I guess, by, I'd rather have a king. No, you don't want a king.
No.
And that's what we and yes, it's easy to say, well, Governor Abbott needs to remember the Texans are in charge, the president, the whoever. Well, we first need to remember that we're in charge.
Right.
Because when it comes down to doing it, people forget that. I notice at committee hearings where I testify, and everybody wants to say, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for allowing me to talk to you today. I don't do that. I'm not going to thank them for doing their job. And I try to teach other people that I mean, be polite and respectful because of the occasion, but I'm not going to thank you for doing the job that I hired you to do.
Right.
So
I get annoyed with the idea that I'm supposed to praise a fish for swimming.
Yes,
that's kind of what they do.
Let me
example.
get a little personal, and one reason I like to get personal is because, Fran and we have access to people that most of the people watching don't, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we can break down those walls and let them into some of these conversations, that makes me so happy. Okay, so we have a Twitter group, right? A private Twitter conversation. And it came out, and I'm going to pick on Nate Schatzline, state rep. I love Nate. He knows that. Yeah. So it should all be okay. But he did a fundraiser, right? And it came up in that Twitter group. What the heck is Nate doing? He was doing a fundraiser. I can't remember who it was with. It was somebody very questionable. It was just recently, but there was like a big name on there that was somebody we are all opposed to. And somebody asked the question, has Nate turned on us already? And I was like, no, he hasn't turned on us. And you jumped in immediately and you said, never assume, always be on him. And you're absolutely right. We need to I don't care who it is, if it's Nate or if it's Tony Tinderholt or Brian Harrison or any of these guys that we love, we have to be on them all the time.
And and we need we need them not as politicians. We need them as fellow citizens in the republic. Setting aside the little job they have. They have then this life outside. We need them holding us accountable too. All of us need each other. Scripture is not was not being flippant. The phrase is iron sharpens iron, one sharpens another. That is absolutely necessary. We absolutely need each other. The worst possible thing that Julie and Fran can do for Michael, that Michael and Fran can do for Julie, kind of all the different combinations, is say, well, yeah, Julie's kind of losing it, but let's not say anything about it.
No, please don't say anything.
That's a horrible thing to do to Julie. And so, if the three of us would do that to each other, why wouldn't we do that for Mr. Schatzline, Mr. Tinderholt, Mr. Abbott, whoever else? We owe that in the same way. If one of my staff is showing up late and disheveled and driving through the parking lot with 2 flat tires, whatever, I have a moral obligation to say to my employee, is everything okay?
Yeah.
What can we do here? That's the obligation we have to each other. And unfortunately, I think that we skip past that obligation, either because, I want Julie to keep sending me the Christmas card, or because, it'd be uncomfortable if me and Fran had to talk to Julie. All this. No. Let's put ourselves aside for a moment and let's be decent people who say we need to hold each other accountable.
Yes. And you would hope that a politician would crave that.
Yeah.
Another thing I see a lot of is excuses. I say, contact your representative about whatever. And I hear, my representative is a Democrat. It's a waste of time. Or he's blocked me on Facebook, so he's not going to listen to me. And people ask me frequently in classes, should I contact my rep even if he's a Democrat? And my answer to that is always absolutely. You need to be telling them what you want. How are they going to know what you want if you don't tell them? So regardless of who the person is, and it goes back to our holding them accountable. When we changed our mission, we decided we don't care who gets elected. They owe us an answer, and we need to make them do that.
Yeah. I do not have a responsibility for how any elected official on my ballot I have no responsibility for how they operate. I can't control them. They're individuals. They act on their own. I though do have a responsibility. I have to speak the truth. Right. I am supposed to be faithful to my obligations as a citizen. But my being faithful to obligation as a citizen doesn't mean that that I get to control what they do. But it does mean that if I'm not willing to speak up, how can I possibly hold them accountable for something? And your point about the Democrat, I don't care if my state rep is a sort of Republican who I really don't like, and I know he doesn't like me.
Yeah. It's an epidemic.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, whether your state rep is a Republican or a Democrat, they signed on the dotted line and said, I want to work for Fran. I want to work for Mike. I want to work for these people. And if I'm not at a minimum communicating what I believe, then how am I ever supposed to think that they might have the opportunity to do the right thing? When we are silent, other people are still speaking, and that
Gosh, that's such a good point.
and the only way to counter the bad influences these politicians get is by us, at a minimum, being faithful in speaking.
Good point.
Yeah. So as you make the rounds at, I don't know how many you're going to, probably 3 or 4 of our satellite locations in the next 3 or 4 months, right before the session starts, I know what the number one question is going to be every time: who's going to be the speaker? So I want to change this conversation a little bit, and let's talk about where we sit today. Nobody has a crystal ball, but let's talk about what are some of the variables in play.
Someone will be a speaker, and under the state constitution, it will be someone who is a member of the Texas House, right? We don't, for as fun as it would be to have Julie McCarty as Speaker of the Texas House, that won't happen.
Not fun for me.
Not fun for you, but hey, go do it. Yeah. So it's going to be, we know it's going to be one of 150 people. At this moment, as the 3 of us are sitting here chatting with all of you nice people watching at some point later, there are only about 8 members of the Texas House who have said to each other quietly, not publicly, that they would probably go to the floor to vote for Dade Phelan as Speaker. 8 Republicans have said that. You can't, and you don't find many Democrats willing to say that, right?
How does that compare to previous?
He needs at a minimum something like 15 people to go to the floor, Republicans, assuming he has all the Democrats.
All the Democrats, yeah.
Yes.
And you can't assume he has all the Democrats right now, because for as frustrating as Dade Phelan has been for Republicans and conservatives, a lot of Democrats aren't very happy with him. They aren't happy. They haven't been happy on a couple of policy things. Again, we all say, oh my gosh, they give everything to the Democrats.
Yeah.
But the Democrats don't see it that way.
Interesting.
So he's upset a number of Democrats. Some of the Democrats just see blood in the water, so they don't want to go with him. Meanwhile, you've got Republicans who are saying, okay, we've got to stop the Democrat chair thing. Phelan, trying to throw a bone to the Democrats, but not very convincingly about banning Democrat chairs. So again, all this boils down to he only has about 8 people to go to the floor with him. And if he doesn't have the majority of doesn't have all of the Democrats, 8 plus a minority of a minority doesn't get you the speakership. Okay. You've got 2 Republicans who have declared, Tom Oliverson and Shelby Slauson, at least at this moment. Talk of other people stepping into the race. The question that the speakership is going to be determined, I believe, and maybe it's I hope rather than I believe, around this idea of the culture of the Texas House. And I think that Tom Oliverson, whose voting record isn't what a lot of kind of the red meat conservatives would say, oh, that's what we want. It's not a horrible record. It's just not a go-get record. But where Tom Oliverson has been the most clear and has been the most forceful has been around the culture needing to be changed in the Texas House. And I think that when you have someone like Tom Oliverson saying, we have a culture problem in the House, that's very important, because that's giving now space for others to talk about. That's why Shelby Slauson has made the same kind of comments about it. Where I think there's a growing recognition. I talked to a fellow who's been in the Texas House, I think, since about 1840, who's also saying, oh man, the Texas House has really gotten off base. And rinse and repeat. A couple of Democrats have said this to me. It's just so weird in the Texas House. The culture is weird in the Texas House. We're rewarding the wrong things in the Texas House. There's this growing recognition of the problem, and you don't fix it by doing the same thing. And the same thing has been the Strauss, Bonin, Phelan coalition.
As long as we've been around.
Managing the affairs of the Texas House. And I think, but the only what's going to break that, though, is with folks continuing to have conversations with their with their state rep. Whether, look, I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat. I don't care if they're an incumbent or they're waiting for the coronation in November, whatever it might be. You need to be having those conversations now with them and tell them your expectations. In the past, a lot of particularly conservative voters think, well, I'm told I'm not supposed to ask questions about the speakership. And members have played that game saying, oh, well, this is something the voters aren't supposed to be involved in. This is for us to determine, that sort of thing. And fortunately, people like y'all and others have, we're not going to pay attention to that. But we can't be bullied. So, look, this is my expectation. I've said this before. I'll say it now on camera. I've said it in front of groups. I think I really don't care if Dade Phelan's the speaker or not. I don't care if they, resurrect the ghost of Dennis Bonnen or someone else be speaker. What I care about are results, and that what we have to make sure they understand is the culture that you have in the Texas House right now precludes the results that the vast majority of Texans want to see come out of the Texas legislature in 2025. If Dade Phelan can deliver, great. It's a new day, the first Tuesday, whatever it is in January. If y'all want to make, reappoint him as speaker, that's fine. But just know, Nate Chetzline. Just know, Brian Harrison. Just know, Steve Toth. Just know, all these guys. That's your vote telling us that you're serious or not serious about fixing the Texas House. The first vote of the legislative session, in many ways, will determine all those results. So, if you think that the person you're voting for speaker is going to fix the culture, that's great. But you better be able to back it up. And the proof is not going to be in the kind things you tell us in your district newsletter in August after the legislative session.
Right.
It's going to be in the laws we see taking effect on September 1st. It's going to be in the changes in operations of agencies beginning that next year. All those kind of things are how we'll know that you succeeded or not.
Right. So I feel pretty excited. I feel like there is definitely a new energy going into this next session. We had some good wins. Like, we're all eager and not only do we have good wins, like we thought we had good wins before, right? Because I have Giovanni as my state rep. So we were all excited about that, and that didn't go anywhere. So the thing is, the people that we've elected this time or that we're sending in tend to have more of a background of activism, like Mike Alcott and Andy Hopper. And, like it would be like Fran or I going into the House. Like, you have seen us work for 10, 15 years, and so we expect big things. So how disappointed are we going to be? Again, that crystal ball.
Yeah, look, our disappointment is usually is in direct proportion to our lack of activism during the legislative session.
Say this.
Because look, here is the uncomfortable truth. Every single person who runs for office, and I mean that, when I say 100% of them, and I won't get angry phone calls. Not me. Yes, I mean you.
Don't bother calling.
All of them do so because they seek the approval of the people who are around them. That's not a bad thing. Our founding fathers created a system of servants. How do you know you've had a fantastic waiter at a nice restaurant? It's one where, as your water glass has begun to drain, and they come without saying a word and very quietly, without interrupting anything, fill your water glass and then fade back away. That person gets a high tip from me, right? Someone who's sensing. They want to please me, right? They want to please you. They want to please the person they're serving, right? That's how our system is. We talk about people pleasers as a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, right? We need people pleasers serving in these offices, and so all these people run for office. They are people pleasers, all of them. They want acclaim. They want approval. What happens? A lot of us on the right are very guilty of this. We get them elected, we pat them on the head, tap them on the butt, and say, now go do good things, and we ignore them.
And we'll see you in 2 years.
We'll see you in 2 years. Yeah. Maybe. Or we may have moved on because some state senator somewhere else in the state, or some congressman, or we direct downward attention somewhere else. And they're in. They should remember that I brought them to the dance.
Yeah. We all have attention deficit disorder.
We all do. And, it's very convenient to say that, the state reps should remember who brought them to the dance. But look, if we're not dancing with them, how do they remember?
Yeah.
How do they remember? Yeah. If we've left them to dance with someone else, well, shame on us that they go home with them, right? Mm-hmm. We have to do a better job of continuing to engage those folks. So when you talk about, how this we're going to be disappointed if we as citizens continue to kind of check out when it comes to the governing. The more that we are involved in the governing, the more likely we are to have good results. So my dad was a football coach when I was growing up. I remember Dad saying this a lot. You may not win every game you show up for, but you will lose every game you show up for, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to do a better job of making sure we show up. We're not getting everything we want. That's just the way the system, unfortunately, works. We should be getting a lot more as citizens. Mm-hmm. But the fact that so many of us tune out, 10 minutes after we vote, is kind of helps explain some of that. And again, because these are people pleasers that we elect, because we're not engaging with them. Now, there's an entire industry in Austin. There's an entire industry in Washington, D.C. There's an entire industry at your school board. There's an entire industry around your city council who all exist to whisper in their ears when they're grassroots, when their constituents are not. And so in order to overcome those voices, we have to be willing as citizens to speak louder.
Which I want to just say something to that, because when you say that, it's like overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up with DC, much less Austin and my county and my city council and my school board. I mean, it's overwhelming, and it's everything is a battle. So even if it was little battles, it's still that adds up to a lot. But one thing that I really try to drive home with activists is that when we're working together, it doesn't seem like such work. And, many hands make light work anyway. Right. But if you can build these friendships and do it side by side, there's such a great sense of reward. Like, I did the right thing and I made good things happen. So it is a lot.
So true. It's so true. One of the founding fathers that we think the least about is Sam Adams. I love Sam Adams. Not a great businessman, fantastic patriot, right? Sam Adams, his biggest contribution, I would argue, to the fact that we exist today was that he created the idea of committees of correspondence, where in little towns and communities around the colonies, they would trade letters back and forth, talking about the abuses that they were suffering, what was working and not working, warning each other about things. I mean, they couldn't trust the establishment media of the day to carry the message. They couldn't count on the news moving fast enough, and so they created their own network of having this kind of
Twitter.
Kind of like social media, and as a result, the people were able to work effectively, right? And that should be inspiring to us because it tells us exactly what you said, Julie. Individually, Sam Adams could not defeat the King of England. Yeah. Individually, George Washington would have been pushing up daisies by the fall of 1776. Rinse and repeat for all these guys. The fact that they were working together is what made them strong. Yeah. And that for us as citizens, we act like a version of the Lone Ranger who shot Tonto 3 miles back and ignores the U.S. cavalry. When you read the old Lone Ranger comic books, the Lone Ranger wasn't actually a Lone Ranger. Right. The Lone Ranger had Tonto. The Lone Ranger had the U.S. Cavalry. The Lone Ranger had the friendly, rancher and the, little kid at the drugstore and all these people. The Lone Ranger was never the Lone Ranger. That was the joke.
That's an excellent point.
Right? But we want to think, in my rugged individualism, I don't need. So all these things do become so overwhelming. Oh my gosh, Congress and the presidency and the legislature and the governor and the city council and the school board. I can't do it all. Yeah, but like you said, with many hands makes light work. The more that we're willing to be in communication with each other, and all of us with our own particular knowledge and background and skills and passions, we can start to manage our government the way our founding fathers envisioned.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what we want to accomplish. Like, we just had a board meeting. So for those of you watching, we will soon be releasing our list of priorities for the next session. You probably have those memorized way better than I do, but let's talk about some of those and what obstacles we might see or what we really feel good about, like we have a good chance of passing. So you want to start with, let's talk about what's a good one to start with?
Well, my favorite is responsible financial stewardship. And under that, we have things like property tax replacement, elimination, whatever you want to call it, banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, responsible budgets, cut spending, all of those.
That's a lot.
Physical
Are we going to get all that, Michael?
But yeah. We're putting our legislative priorities in categories this year. So one category is responsible financial stewardship. And lots of things fall under that. But the things I just mentioned are the biggies.
Yeah. And until we are willing to control spending, we don't control anything.
No.
Government, the most fearsome power of government is not the ability to execute someone. It's the ability to take money from your wallet. You know, that is the most fearsome power. Because you're supposed to say thank you after they do it. You know, when the guy mugs me, I'm never required to say thank you, right? But when your state
what if
rep
he mugged
does
you
it,
and then gave you a Christmas card?
Yeah. That whoa. It's okay. Everything's wonderful. Yeah. I think that some of these things we have to be willing as citizens, as conservatives, to look at moving the ball steadily down the field to victory. Very often we kind of convince ourselves, we need a Hail Mary pass to win the game. You know, in the first minute of the first quarter with a 99-yard pass. You know,
Fourth special session.
Yeah. We need to be willing to work incrementally. Now, I'm a big fan. I like the Hail Mary passes. I love the 2-point conversions. All those kind of things are great, right? But we also have to make sure that we're kind of planning both ways. I think that when we think about things like property tax elimination, we have let our politicians, both at the state and local level, tell us, it's so complicated. It's really not that complicated. It's not nearly as complicated as they make it out to be. The more complicated they can make this idea of eliminating big chunks of our property tax burden, the more complicated they can make it seem, the less willing people are to want to talk about it. And a lot of this happens, and it's particularly on the financial things I found, where a well-intentioned citizen walks up to their legislator and says, what's most important to me is my property taxes went up X%, and it would be great if you would eliminate the school property tax. And the response is, okay, well, what's your plan? That's what the politicians do all the time. What's your plan?
They do that.
And we get, it's complicated. I've not thought about it. All I get is my bill, and I know I'm paying too much. So and we get cowed into silence by that. The kid at the Chick-fil-A, when I ordered my 12 nuggets, large fry, and large sweet tea.
We should talk about your diet after this.
I know, we probably should. Mrs. Sullivan would appreciate it if someone talked about my diet. He didn't say to me, so where do I find the tea leaves to ground up? Do you know where the sugar is? What ratio of peanut oil goes into the deep fryer? How big should we cut the nuggets? He doesn't say any of those things.
Right.
They just bring out to me the crack-laden, magical, yumminess that I call my lunch. And again, but when politicians do it, we all get very embarrassed. I don't know the process, we need to stop that. There are employees. It's not, if you went to Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, and put a gun to his head, he could no more make an iPhone than any one of the three of us. That's not his job. That's not what he does. You and I and our fellow citizens, we're the CEOs. We're the corporate board. You could go to every single person on the board at Apple, which includes, the guy who invented the internet, Al Gore. Go to every one of those people. Not a single one of them could make an iPhone. Most of them probably don't even know how to turn it on, right? But that's not their job. Their job is to make sure the company works with the people who can do those things, You and I, we are the corporate board. We are in charge. It's, when your state rep, your state senator, your school board member, your mayor, they signed up and said, I am smart enough to figure out the problems. I am smart enough to deliver for you what you want. Okay, here's what I want. I want my property taxes decreased by approximately 40% over the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. Well, how to do it? You're the weirdo, put your name on the line, not me. That's your job to figure out. And if you can't, I'm relatively certain that there is someone in our community and neighboring areas who is smart for it. So maybe I'll try him for the job. If you're not willing to solve the problem, look, I've had to fire people. I don't like firing people. It's not fun, but often it's because they weren't willing to do the job.
Mm-hmm. I have had that actual conversation with my county judge on numerous occasions.
Yeah.
When I suggested he adopt a lower tax rate, and he said, well, what do you want me to cut, Fran? And my response was, that is not my job to figure out. That is yours.
Not your current county judge.
Not my current county judge.
He's awesome.
My former county judge. I don't have to have those conversations any longer. But yeah, and I saw a response from a state representative the other day that someone else had contacted them about eliminating property tax. And his response was, yeah, you people always want us to do these things, but you never come back with any solutions. You never come back with any plans. And I mean, in the case of property tax, that's not true. Numerous people have offered good plans to eliminate property tax. They just throw those out the window and go do something different that doesn't help at all. But yeah, I think that's a common problem. And I agree. More often, we need to say, that's why we hired you.
That's why we hired you.
Yeah.
So what's one of your, what are you going to zero in on?
So that kind of depends on the category question, right? I think that, and this is for someone who occasionally gets very annoyed with all things partisan politics, one of the most important things we could do in elections is closing our primaries. Make people declare on the front end. This whole game we play in Texas, where a left-wing Democrat donor to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, who has run for Congress as a Democrat in the last 12 months, can just wake up and go, hey, I think I'm going to go play games in the Republican election. That's just crazy. Most states have some form of closed primary. Because what is the primary? The primary is where you are picking the nominee for a party, right? That's not everyone gets to play game. You have to declare. And that way people can be informed. And some folks, you're trying to block people. No, I just want people to make a decision earlier so now they can actually know who the candidates are. The only way you can know who the candidates are is if they're talking to you. Currently, our candidates running, and whether it's Republicans or Democrats, they actually don't know who to talk to. And so we're inefficiently spending money in politics because they start, playing these crazy games of trying to, divine with, chicken entrails and, smoke signals who anyone's going to vote for. They can start mailing them. So much better if we required people to say, call it in, January even, I'm going to be voting in the Republican primary this year. Maybe, or I won't vote at all. But if I vote, I'll vote in the Republican primary. Great. Now at a minimum, those candidates can know who to talk to, people who have expressed an interest in that. If to say that is disenfranchising people is to say that we're not adults. And I'm sorry, if people can't make the adult decision in December or January before an election that, what party they're going to participate in, quite frankly, I don't want that person participating in the process. And I know that we're not supposed to say that. We're not supposed to say, so people shouldn't participate. Oh, no, there are some people who shouldn't. If they're not willing to do that. So closing the primary is important. The current system we have is designed to benefit the crony establishment. It's designed to benefit people who operate at odds with the citizenry of Texas. I've been writing about them. I'll eventually have a piece written on this. Came across an old survey that the George Soros website in Austin used to do, a little feature they would call Inside Intelligence, it was called. And Inside Intelligence, it was talking to kind of a bipartisan mix of lobbyists and campaign consultants, that kind of thing. And the most notable thing, looking over the couple years worth of results of these Inside Intelligence surveys, was these guys I don't know what state they lived in, but they didn't live in Texas. They were wrong about everything. According to these people, the lieutenant governor of Texas right now should be some clown named Todd Staples, who in that election came in third. According to these people, we don't care about, border security. According to these people, property taxes aren't a real issue. To go rinse and repeat, these folks completely out of touch. That's who is benefited by keeping the primaries open. And we need to really
So in the
fix
circles that you run in, do you feel like there's some momentum there? To me, I just thought that was a pipe dream.
I think there is some momentum, but only, the circles I run are, human beings who look at the legislature and go, those people are whack. So to the extent that enough of us start saying, we expect this to happen, hats off to both the former party chair, Matt Rinaldi, and the current party chair, Abraham George, as well as about, 8,000 of their closest friends at the Republican convention who said, no, we're doing that this year. We're going to make this happen.
Is that enough?
I think it probably, because those are the people who, Republicans.
They run the primary.
Yeah, they're the ones who go and block walk and everything else. It's going to take those people making phone calls saying this is what we expect structurally. So closing the primary, I think, is from an election perspective really important. Working towards the elimination of the school M&O tax is kind of my second big thing I'm looking for. I've been very disappointed by our Republican lawmakers for, a long time, because this is easy. This is an easy one. I know some of our friends, we'll just eliminate property taxes outright completely next year. Well, okay. And this is where, in my own head, I can't imagine how you fund the, some rural, water district that doesn't have any retail in it for a sales tax. How do you fund that? And there's a way. I know there's got to be a way. I don't know what that is. But in my head, I know exactly how you get rid of the school M&O tax. And you could get rid of that in very short order. And that's 50, 60% of your property tax bill. If we got rid of the school M&O property tax, your property tax burden drops, again, 50, 60%. We go from having one of the highest property tax burdens in the nation to one of the lowest property tax burdens. We might, for all the legislators who get all weird when we talk about eliminating property tax, we might do that and all of us look around and go, feel pretty good about this. We're done. Or we might all look at that and go, we know what? While doing that, I figured out how to take care of the water municipal districts. I figured out how to take care of the this or the that. It's only, we have to get started though. And instead of getting started, the only thing we've done is grow government. Instead of getting started, the only thing that we've done is increase tax burdens.
So last month we interviewed Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, Andrew McVeigh, and we had a very extensive conversation about how we had all this extra money and they raised the budget. They spent more than they've ever done in the history of the world and, all these things. So if people are really interested in digging into how we get rid of the M&O, just watch last month's podcast because tons of great information there. Yeah.
I think my third and my big thing I'm looking for is something that Lois Colcourt started. We had come out just recently, our new documentary, Red Power. And
we're going to talk about that.
And Lois Colcourt has been beating this drum for a very long time. She's a Republican from Brenham, Texas. And this idea of letting Red China own property in Texas, letting these hostile foreign governments get these big footholds, and more importantly, these strategic footholds close to military installations, plugging into our electric grid. All of that is very problematic, and the Texas Senate has tried to address it, and surprise, surprise, anyone paying attention, the Texas House has not been helpful on this question, and this is again, to set aside my silly little thoughts about closing the primary. Big nerd. Property taxes. Big nerd. Me and Andrew McVeigh will have nice long conversation. If you shift this column to this column, we can nerd out on that stuff. But this goes to whether or not my children will have a country.
Isn't it odd? It's like so obvious. It's the most elementary of topics, and yet it has to be one of your top three because we have gotten it so wrong.
Yeah.
Like how are we here?
Well, this is that kind of faux libertarian,
yes,
kind of mindset of, I should be allowed to sell my property to anyone I want. Look, if I live next to a school and some, child molester shows up wanting to buy my house, I'm not telling him to not get my lawn, but he might leave with some lead in his backside, right? No, I'm not going to sell. I don't care how much he offers. I'm not going to sell my property to that guy. And I think this goes to this question of kind of that Lone Ranger idea, where all I'm going to do is look out for myself. Okay, well, that's certainly your right, but slitting your wrists is your right too, I guess. But I'm going to do everything in my power to stop you from doing it, And I think this is where we have to do a better job of holding each other accountable, talking with our neighbors. This idea that I should be allowed to sell my property to anyone if they're going to pay all this money. I don't care if it's a Red Army general who's wanting to spy on a military base. If I want to sell my land to him, I should be allowed to. Well, you're evil then, and I feel sorry for you. And I'm going to write long essays about you, on Facebook. So
I'm going to read them.
Yeah, so that wherever you go, people point at you and laugh and mock your children. So your children have to change their names because their daddy sold out his country. There's a price for selling out your country, and I think that we need to start taking this stuff seriously. China takes this very seriously, and we're not taking it seriously.
I love that. I love that those are your top issues. It's a little bit different than it has been in years past. And so for those of us that are in it year after year, it keeps it a little bit more interesting. So I do want to talk about your documentary, because we talked about how you do podcasts and how you have the written news, but you do have documentaries. I want to talk about that. And then Fran's going to give us some action items to wrap this up, and she'll talk with you about that. But let's talk about the podcast, or the documentary about Red China. So we're talking now, when it releases, like in a week?
Yeah, the 27th of August.
By the time this comes out,
right,
it'll have already been out for a week.
Right.
So you can speak freely and not worry about you spilling the beans before it's released. But what are we expecting here?
Yeah, for those who have now seen the documentary,
I'm sure everybody's already
seen it. So we're all done. Yeah, okay, Fran. We're looking at what we've allowed this kind of built-in insecurity to go into our electric grid. One of the experts we talked to in the documentary is a guy named Alex Epstein. He's written extensively about the need for energy security, energy reliability, and in many ways, kind of the miracle that has been reliable energy. That you look back, it's in the last 150, 200 years, you've seen worldwide, every possible metric of human flourishing has just gone through the roof. Life expectancy, income. We have. No one likes to talk about this because it's not politically appropriate, but we've crushed poverty. And not just in the United States. Poor people in the United States, if you're living on the street, it's because you're mentally ill, and you live in a liberal area where no one wants to help you. Right. That's kind of, that's who lives on the streets now. You don't have family. The only reason a family might be living under either is because someone in the family is mentally ill and is refusing to get help and treatment. And that help treatment, by the way, because of our safety nets, is free in most cases, right? So, we have crushed real poverty. Now poverty is in some ways choice, which I don't mean as a happy choice. It's people who are mentally ill make bad choices, right? And you look worldwide where there's reliable energy. There's not the kind of poverty you had in the late 1800s, the mid 1800s. You don't have that kind of poverty anymore. This miracle, and that we just kind of lose sight of. People aren't dying at the age of 35 of old age. People are now living into their 70s. Everywhere, and even older in some cases, right? This is because of reliable energy. But now we have this instability coming in. Where we now do have. We now in Texas are having to wonder: is the lights going to come on? Is the AC going to go out in August? Is the heat going to not come on in February? These are not questions we were asking in the 1980s and the 1990s. We are, as Alex Epstein said, we are uninventing the reliable energy grid. Absolutely crazy. And that's because we have, over the last 20 years, inserted unreliability on the grid in the form of wind and solar through all these subsidies. And then so that's one that's bad enough. But pushing that has been China.
I was like, where is this going? Where's that connection with?
So China has been pushing this. China, a country that has to import all of its food. They can't feed their people. They cannot be their communist state. They cannot feed their people, right? They don't have energy resources in China. They have to all their energy they have to import.
Where do they import it from?
Us all over the world. They buy.
Really?
They pay dollars to buy for oil, buy for all these kind of things. Yeah. About what they can do is because they've got all this labor, they can put things together. They can make things. We like getting $3 shoes built by put together by some 9-year-old in some slave labor camp outside of in kind of Western China. We just don't ask questions, right? But what we've been doing is we've been allowing those same people then to build solar panels and windmills. That's where China got us. The left pushing their false god of environmentalism. We've got to be green. Got to be green. Got to be green. Green has translated into red power because China steps in. They're able, something like 70% of every solar panel is made in China. 30 to 70% of every wind generator is made in China. They're plugging into our net, bring in unreliability. Unreliability. If you have an unreliable energy system, you have an unreliable economy. If you have an unreliable economy, you have an unreliable military. Okay. So that makes us weak national security. The same thing it does, though, particularly what China has been invested in. You see this, and this is where Texas particularly comes into play. We have a lot of very important military installations in Texas. And you have red Chinese generals buying land, and not just in Texas, elsewhere also, 600-foot, and wanting to put in 600-foot and higher windmills where they can use a technology that Kyle Bass, a businessman from Dallas, has been talking a lot about, called over-the-horizon mapping, where they put it way up high, 600 feet up in the air, and they can now map down to a square inch of resolution. And you think about that, and you think about new spy planes, new drones, personnel movement, all those kind of things.
I'm ready to go into the bunker.
This is how. So China is working kind of two angles. They're getting a strategic foothold into our country, being able to literally look into our. If Julie McCarty tried to fly a drone over a military installation, you'd get in trouble.
Yes.
Set up but China can set up a 600-foot windmill and peer into the same space, and we subsidize them for doing it. So we're sending billions and billions of dollars to Red China to purchase the stuff that they're using to spy us, but they're also using that then is also making electricity, making our energy grid less reliable, all of which spells disaster. And this is something that the Texas legislature can fix. We can actually do things about this. And more importantly, human beings can do something about this, because the key to everything with these so-called renewables, they're not renewable, these so-called green energy, it's not green, but there is something we can do, and that is they are all key off of subsidies. And if you want to stop Red China cold in its tracks, you stop the subsidies. If we don't stop the subsidies, Kyle Bass said that if corporate America had its way, we'd all be speaking Mandarin right now. Corporate America just didn't care less. They could not care less about your liberty. And that, if we don't, we can stop it. We can put an end to this. If we're not committed to that, we probably should start learning to speak Mandarin. If we want to preserve our way of life, we need to stop the subsidies for green energy.
Can it go backward?
Absolutely.
I mean, what's already been done, can it be undone?
Absolutely.
If they already own land, how do you take that away?
Look, several states have already done it. They have passed legislation saying can't own it. They have to divest themselves of the land.
Wow.
You remember, government is a fearsome thing, right? Remember, like I said, executing you is not the worst thing. Taking your money is probably the worst thing. Coupled with taking your land. Depriving you. And so that's a fearsome power. I mean, this is a case.
That'll drive the libertarians crazy.
Drive them crazy. But we have to defend our nation.
Yes.
So those kind of things. Also interesting, one of Chip Roy, U.S. representative from Texas, brought this up in my conversation with him, that in China they're building they're building a new coal-fired power plant every about 3 days. We're building none. They're building one every 3 days. They're building none. Meanwhile, China, we're giving them money to buy solar panels. They're taking that money building coal-fired plants. We're plugging in solar panels into our electric grid. Solar panels that fail every day at 6 p.m. They stop working because the sun goes down. Absolutely insane. So here they are building up very reliable energy while we are taking our system becoming unreliable.
That they've manufactured.
Yeah. The way to turn it around, things that, this is the kind of thing that makes a lot of us as conservatives a little queasy. But Texas voters approved this in 2023. The creation, I think it's called the Texas Energy Fund, that does low-cost loans. Bill Peacock of the Energy Alliance said, look, this is a consequence of all these subsidies. And Peacock's not a fan of this energy fund, but he does kind of admit, look, we've been all this time subsidizing this, green energy. So, subsidies to fix subsidies apparently is the thing. But you've got this low energy loan program, and as Lois Colcourse told me, in some ways the state is having to do this because our national banks, which used to loan money to people wanting to build a natural gas plant, a coal-fired plant, a nuclear plant, which is super scary, but France is building them out the wazoo right now. Banks used to fund that in the United States. We stopped using private money for funds because of ESG, environmental social governance investing philosophy in banks, has now stopped all of that flow of money. So if a private investor, needs to borrow money to build a natural gas-fired, reliable electric plant, they just can't right now. The money's not there because of ESG and the banks.
So you're saying subsidy.
So this is where Texas is coming in with these, call it a subsidy. I'll call it a subsidy. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Colcourse, Bob Hall, all the legislators, they'll call it low-interest loans. They are low-interest loans. We'll call it subsidies. That's fine. But at the end of the day, but that's now the law of the land. You're starting to see people make applications into that. Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick announced, back in July, I guess it was, that there's now so much interest.
They want to up the funds from 5 to 10.
Up the funds from 5 to 10, because there are businessmen who are recognizing, look, the Texas market needs reliability. They're, and they can't get banks to loan the money. Therefore, that's where this, which theoretically, if all things work out in government, which we all know they always do, this means that that money does come back into the fund because it's a loan and not a handout. What we've done to China. We just handed them the cash. We just handed them the cash.
Isn't the Chapter 403 that was passed last session the thing where school districts could give tax abatements to corporations for building in their district? And a lot of those used to go to green energy companies. We need to repeal that too.
Yeah, so the original mechanism is now gone. There's a new mechanism. They have to go through a lot more hoops to do it now, which is good. But there's still a pathway for it. There's a pathway. And this is why I say that the subsidies matters and where we can be involved. You don't have to count on Governor Abbott and Speaker whoever and Lieutenant Governor Patrick and the merry band of 185, whatever it is. You don't have to count on them to do anything. You and I can, when we hear about these projects, can call our school board president. They probably go to church with you. You can talk to your mayor who lives, 2 blocks over. You can talk to your city council member who you see at the grocery store, and say, not here. we're not giving this. And you've got community after community after community after community that's now been doing this. It's very encouraging.
Yes.
I talked to a guy named Jeff Tucker from Brown County, who he and his friends, they stopped a lot of the stuff because they just went to they told their school board, told their county commissioners, we're not doing this here. And they didn't do it here. And guess what? They didn't get built. Why didn't they get built? Because subsidies are the key. If we stop the subsidies, we stop the unreliability. If we stop the subsidies, we tell China to go back to Beijing.
Which all starts with grassroots doing something.
Grassroots activism, always.
That's a great segue. Let's talk about action items that we have for people.
Action items. Okay. My last 3 Friday messages have all been about things that you and I can do to try to influence who's going to be the Speaker of the House. And it's not so important as that it's this person or that person, but the kind of person that will bring true reform to the Texas House. So if you've missed those, either go find them or email me. I will send it to you, whatever you need, because there's 3 different ones with specific actions to take on that front. Next thing is elections. We need people working elections. Poll workers, election judges and clerks and poll watchers and all that. Campaigns need your help during the final stretches. There's plenty of opportunities that we put on our Facebook pages. We promote whatever we can for Senator Cruz or whatever, but please go and do something to help good people get elected and make sure that our elections are reasonably transparent and fair. And election workers can be important in that. Getting ready for the 89th session. Our next few monthly meetings throughout the state will include programs on getting ready for the next session. We have now adopted our legislative priorities. I'll be ready to publish that in the next week or so. We are going to have a special kickoff day at the legislature in Austin, probably late January, early February. We're going to do something fun. We'll do a tour of the Capitol. We'll talk to legislators. We'll hand out our legislative priorities. We want tons of people there. We call it True Texan Day at the Capitol, and we do that once per session. So watch for that. And the last thing I put on my list of action items is prayer. Our country, our state needs prayers. We all need to be praying daily for good outcomes from this election, good outcomes from the next legislative session, and pray for each other who are in the fight. Michael, do you have any action item to add to that?
I could not add to that even if I wanted to. That's fantastic.
I can add to that. We want everyone to watch a documentary.
Thank you.
We want people to, if you can't get enough of Michael Quinn Sullivan, you find on our website, on the events page.
They're already had enough of Michael Quinn
Sullivan. No, never enough. Come on. Just find where he's speaking or any of the others. So show up at our meetings, get ready for the session. We're always doing something and we have fun doing it. So I think that's such a key is that we have fun doing it.
I forgot to mention the Christmas party when I was doing announcements, but we're doing our annual Christmas party on December 12th in Grapevine, which is the Christmas capital of the world.
The world of Texas.
Of Texas. No, the world. It's the
Germany
world.
Might argue with you.
I just arranged a hotel block, which is on the Ticket Tailor site where you buy your tickets. So you get a special price on a room at a hotel in Grapevine, and you can stay 3 days before the event or 3 days after the event and take advantage of all of the wonderful Grapevine Christmas festivities. So it's going to be a whole lot of fun. It always is. It's our dueling pianos program. And it's just more fun than a human being should be allowed to have.
That's right. We love to have a good time. So watch for the documentary. We're going to work on getting that have it make the round with our satellites as well. So until then, if you will toast with us, Michael, here's to Texas.
And here's to true Texans.
Thanks, everyone.